Hey Robotics, it's Ms. Haynes as part 2 of our lecture about technological systems. We have just talked about, if you watched this video earlier today, the part 1, that was about resources. Now we're going to talk about 2 types of systems, or 2 different ways systems can proceed. So the first way that we're going to talk about is an open loop system. And this is like the flow chart again. It's using an example this time of a microwave. And there's the rest of the material if you need it. So you want a hot meal. You want to put your meal into the microwave. You want it to come out and be a hot meal. That's your desired result. So the microwave, the process it does, it takes the resources it has, like electric power from the wall. It takes the food you put into it. It has all the materials it needs inside of it. It uses those resources to generate microwaves that will then excite the water molecules and make that heat up. So you tell it how long it goes for. That's the user input. You close the door, you might set the power levels. That's the user input. And then it goes, it does its thing. And when it's done, it dings or beeps at you. And the result is your food's warm. Now, this microwave has no way of knowing how hot your food is. It doesn't have a thermometer inside of it. It doesn't know how hot you really want it because you never programmed that because it doesn't have a thermometer. Why bother programming for temperature if it can't sense the temperature? You can't control what the temperature is. You can only control the time that it goes for. And so with experience, you kind of know, well, this product, this meal will take a minute and a half to warm up, or this needs to be 3 minutes on half power or whatever. But the microwave itself doesn't know that. It just does what you tell it to do. It goes until its time is up and then it stops. So if you don't cook it for long enough, you might get food that's still cold. You cook it for too long, you could burn it. It could just be gross and too hot to eat. You might have to let it cool off again. And it could just be the nature of your microwavable dish that you have to stop it and take it out and stir it up so the middle's not frozen solid and the outsides aren't nuclear hot when you get them out of there. So that's an open loop system. It has no sensors inside. It cannot change what it's doing while it's doing it. It will go until it's done and then it stops. It will do what it's been told to do and stop. So that's one kind of programming that you're going to have. You're going to say, okay, do this, then stop. And that's an open loop system. So other open loop systems. Pause here, think about it for a second, and come back. There are a couple examples that I'm going to show. One example is a wood stove. You put wood in, you light it on fire, you close the door, maybe you adjust how much oxygen goes into it by opening up the flue. Your temperature is not going to stay constant. You can't control the temperature. It can't sense the temperature inside of itself. You can observe it and change things externally, but it doesn't have any, it has no feedback for itself. It doesn't know what's going on. It burns, it radiates the heat, it emits the smoke out the top. That's what it does. Washer dryer. Do your clothes always come out clean and dry after washing and drying them? It depends on how old your washing machine is. A lot of the time you need to maybe run your washer twice if something's really dirty, or you may forget to put the right kind of stain treatment in. Your stuff might still come out stained, or you might forget to put the detergent in and it still comes out kind of gross. It might not smell very good, even if it's kind of got the dirt washed out of it. The dryer, if you've ever put jeans in the dryer, if you don't let it run long enough, sometimes the waistbands especially stay wet longer. And the older washers and dryers, they don't have any sensors inside of them to tell them how hot they are, how cold they are, whether their clothes are dry, whether the dirt's coming out of them. They don't have any of that sort of information. Modern ones do, but let's talk about ones that don't first. The train. A train doesn't have constant speed while it's traveling. Like, you can want it to have constant speed, but that requires you to make changes. It doesn't change itself. It doesn't have cruise control. You tell it how much power, either by, old times you'd feed coal into it, and that's how much power you'd get. And maybe modern trains, you don't do that. You just tell it, okay, it needs to increase the engine, decrease the engine. You put the brakes on if it has brakes. It's an open loop system. It doesn't, unless there's someone controlling it, it's open loop. There's no feedback. There's probably not even speedometers on some trains. They just go. So it's going to ask, what's different about these systems? If you have a furnace with a thermostat in your house, you can adjust the thermostat. And inside that area where the thermostat is, there is a thermometer. If you set it to be 70 degrees, that thermometer is taking a reading nearly constantly, sending information to the furnace. The furnace is only going to kick on if it's colder than 70 degrees at that location. So that's how the thermostat works. It has a sensor, and there is some sort of computer chip or something that will say, oh, if this condition changes, then I need to tell the machine to do something. I need to tell the furnace to kick on or kick off. I need to increase the burn or decrease the burn. And that's how thermostats work. They've got a sensor and they got a brain. A bicycle, when you're riding it anyways, the rider gets to look around and has input that you're taking in, and you can make changes to how fast you're pedaling, the direction you're going, whether you choose to go over a jump or not, whether you need to brake. So that's got feedback. You use your sensors to make these changes. In a car with a speedometer, that's a sensor that's built into the car. It senses how fast it's going, and either you can have it on autopilot, which is like a brain, right? You're telling it, hey, I want it to be not autopilot, cruise control. That's the word. It's not autopilot. Cruise control. If you want it to go 40 miles an hour and you push the buttons, your car will take the sensor information from the speedometer and it'll make adjustments to whether it's accelerator or it's braking, acceleration and braking. It'll make adjustments so that you stay about 40 miles per hour the entire time you're driving. If you don't have cruise control, or if you're not using cruise control, then the user, you, are looking at the sensor and saying, oh, I'm going, 55 miles per hour? Oh, it's a 45 mile per hour zone. I should probably slow down. That's a closed loop system. You've got a desired result. Let's say you want to go 30. You're in a 30 mile per hour zone. The car takes in fuel and oxygen, it burns it moves its parts, it moves the drive shaft, it moves the wheels, the tires grip the road, all that stuff happens, it moves you forward down the road. The result, you're actually going 50 miles an hour. Well, since it's a closed loop system with the driver in control, you can monitor the system and say, oh, my speedometer says I'm going 50. I'm going to have to change something. And so that's what you do. You compare your actual speed to the speed you want to be going, you think about it, and you say, oh, I've got to change it. And then you control what happens. There's a comparator and a controller step in the closed loop system. I don't like the slide very much, but it's asking you, hey, are these open loop or closed loops? The clock in the center there is probably a open loop system. Unlikely that a clock that looks like that has any sort of communication with the outside world. It's not going to set the time automatically. It's not going to set alarms automatically. You tell it what to do, and it just goes until it runs out of battery. The dishwasher in the picture probably is an open loop system. You probably just push the buttons and set the dial, and then you hit the button and it goes, and it does what you told it to do. Some dishwashers might have like a water sensor. It might be able to sense if there's extra particles in, if there's still dirt coming off the dishes, food particles coming off the dishes. But the older ones you have, they don't have any sensors in them. I'm leaning on this. You can probably hear it squeaking. The traffic light. A lot of traffic lights are programmed. They will turn on for 5 minutes, green this way, then they turn yellow to red, and then this way turns green, and they get 5 minutes to go. Now, some intersections will have that closed loop thing going on where they have your car will come up, it'll stop, it'll have a sensor, the magnets under that part at the very front of that line where you're stopped will say, hey, there's a car here. This car we should change the light. Or when the light changes, we should give an advanced left turn for the left turn lane. So that's a closed system if it's got that sensor. If it's just, if you're out in the country and it's just a traffic light, it just has timer, it's open loop. Your stereo most likely is open loop. Everything it doesn't have any sensors. It doesn't have any decibel sensor. It can't turn itself down. It doesn't know what a commercial is. If it's on the radio, it's not going to say, oh, there's a commercial. Let me stop and pick it up again. And when it's back to music, it doesn't have that sensibility. And this robot in the bottom right corner, I don't know, it could be a toy robot that you just wind up and go, and that's an open loop system. Or maybe it's intended to be something that you've programmed and it has sensors in its eyes and it has a sensor on its belly there. I don't know what that means. Maybe it's a power sensor for it. I don't know. If that's the case, that's a closed loop system. These are all images someone probably found on clip art put in this presentation. So that's why I was always that overachiever kid, that smart aleck who was like, but what if? But I don't know for sure what that's supposed to be. And then there's kids who are not the smart aleck who are just like, oh, it's probably supposed to be a robot that's got programming and sensors, and so it's closed loop. I'm always extra, unfortunately. Made subjective things very difficult in school. There's my image resources for this. Well, it's not mine. I didn't make it. And that is the end of this presentation. So I'm going to go on to, wow, why is that open? I was looking at something on YouTube, that's why. I'm going to go ahead and stop this. Y'all have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to y'all again soon.